Have you ever felt the weight of your own mistakes pressing down so heavily that it seems no one else could ever understand, let alone forgive you? Most people think that time heals, that penance or self-punishment is the path to redemption, that if you endure enough discomfort, if you carry enough guilt, somehow you will balance the scales. But what if the scales were never meant to be balanced by suffering alone? What if the very thing you've been resisting, your own acceptance, your own understanding, is the only bridge to freedom? Imagine for a moment the way your mind replays every misstep, every harsh word, every choice you regret, as though the past is a cage you cannot escape. Society, your friends, even the people you've hurt, may have moved on, but you remain locked in a quiet war with yourself, convinced that forgiveness is a luxury you don't deserve. And yet, the truth that most never see is both terrifying and liberating. The hardest battle you will ever fight is not against the world, not against those who wronged you, not even against the consequences of your actions. The battle is inward. It is the struggle to meet your own eyes without flinching, to hold your own hand through the darkness you carry, to finally tell yourself that you are, despite everything, worthy of release. This is where the common narratives fail, where the typical advice collapses. You have been trained to look outward, to seek absolution from others, to measure your value by external approval, but no one else can free you from the chains you forged around your own heart. This is the paradox. Forgiveness is both the simplest and the most arduous act because it demands honesty, courage, and a confrontation with yourself that you may have avoided for years. Consider for a moment what it would mean to surrender that self-flagellation, to stop letting guilt dictate your every action, to see your errors not as permanent stains, but as echoes of a journey you cannot undo but can understand. It is not a denial of responsibility, it is a recognition that the human heart, with all its flaws, is capable of growth, of insight, of reconciliation. The man who forgives himself does not do so because he is excused, but because he is awake to the reality that living in perpetual condemnation only perpetuates suffering. And as strange as it sounds, it is precisely this awakening, this confrontation with your own inner judgment, that opens the door to clarity, peace, and a profound kind of freedom you may have never imagined. If you are here listening, perhaps even now you feel the subtle pull of that possibility, that gentle invitation to stop the endless cycle of blame and self-criticism. I want to invite you, as you reflect on these words, to take a small but powerful step. Share this moment with someone else. Comment your thoughts, or simply breathe and acknowledge the courage it takes to even consider forgiving yourself. By doing so, you are not only allowing these reflections to spread, but also participating in a subtle yet profound movement of awakening that connects us all. In the moments ahead, we will explore what it truly means to forgive yourself, how the illusion of guilt binds us, and why the act of self-forgiveness is the beginning of a freedom most men never experience. Before awakening, the weight of your mistakes feels absolute, as though every wrong decision, every moment of weakness has permanently marked you. You live in the quiet shadow of regret, moving through life with a hollow awareness that your past defines your present. Every interaction becomes a test. Will they see the person you are now, or will they only see the failures you carry? In this state, forgiveness is seen as impossible because it seems external. You imagine that if others don't forgive, then you have no right to forgive yourself. And so the cycle continues. You are trapped in a loop, measuring your worth against memories that cannot be rewritten, and each day you feel further from peace. But then comes the subtle shift, the moment when you begin to notice that guilt itself is not a fixed truth, but a pattern you have unconsciously agreed to participate in. It is here, in the quiet observation of your own suffering, that the first flickers of freedom appear. The mistakes you've made are no longer proof of your inadequacy. They are evidence that you are human, that you acted within the limits of your knowledge, fear, and desire. This realization does not erase the past, nor does it excuse it, but it reframes it. What seemed like an insurmountable burden begins to reveal itself as a teacher, showing you where attachment, fear, and self-judgment have dominated your life. As you continue, you notice the tension between appearance and essence. Others may perceive you as distant, withdrawn, perhaps even proud, but inside, a different transformation is unfolding. The man who once sought validation now finds strength in self-honesty. The one who feared judgment discovers the courage to sit with his own mistakes. And in this internal reorientation, you begin to understand that the world's approval was never necessary. What seemed like isolation is in fact the beginning of clarity. What appeared as weakness is quietly becoming resilience. The external world may still react with confusion or skepticism, but it cannot touch the profound shift taking place within your consciousness. This deconstruction of connection and belief continues as you examine the silent agreements that have bound you. The ideas that you must suffer to atone, that love and respect are earned only through perfection, that every misstep diminishes your value. These are illusions, sustained by repetition and fear. When you stop participating in them, the grip loosens. The more you observe without judgment, the more your inner landscape changes. You start to see patterns of thought for what they are, not as immutable truths, but as habits formed over time. In this space, forgiveness becomes possible, not because it is easy, but because the structures sustaining your self-condemnation are dissolving. Finally, you begin to feel the first subtle consequences of this inner transformation. Life outside remains largely the same, yet inside, a new rhythm emerges. Decisions are no longer made from guilt or fear, but from clarity and alignment with what truly matters. Emotions, once heavy with regret, begin to settle into understanding. Even in the smallest moments, how you speak, how you move, how you respond to challenges, there is a sense of freedom, a quiet strength born not from avoidance, but from engagement with your own inner truth. The journey is still ongoing, but you have taken the first real step toward liberating yourself from the chains of your own judgment. As you move deeper into this path of self-forgiveness, the contrast between who you were and who you are becoming becomes sharper, almost startling. Previously, your days were marked by tension and distraction, a constant replay of imagined failures that dictated your every action. You sought reassurance from the world, craving validation to fill a void only you could truly confront. Your own judgments, relentless and unforgiving, were like chains, invisible yet unyielding, and every decision carried the weight of imagined condemnation. Life felt heavy, constricted, and yet there was a strange comfort in this suffering, a belief that enduring the pain proved your seriousness, your morality, your capacity to change. But awakening to self-forgiveness reveals the illusion in all of this. You begin to notice how much energy was wasted on maintaining an identity dictated by fear and external expectation. The habits of shame, the endless cycles of remorse, the need to apologize preemptively for even the smallest misstep. These no longer have power over you. In their place, a different rhythm emerges. The quiet awareness that mistakes are not annihilations of self, but signals, markers pointing toward areas where insight and growth are possible. The same acts you condemned yourself for now become opportunities for reflection, for learning, and for compassion directed inward. You see that the burden was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to teach, to refine, and to show you where you have been living in illusion. Externally, the change is subtle but undeniable. Friends, colleagues, even strangers may notice a shift, a calmness where there was tension, a quiet confidence where there was anxiety, a presence where there was restlessness. To them, you may appear distant, aloof, or even detached, and perhaps some will misinterpret your clarity as arrogance. Yet this is the paradox. What looks like isolation, what appears as strangeness, is actually the emergence of authenticity. You are no longer at war with yourself, and in letting go of internal conflict, you begin to inhabit a space where honesty, groundedness, and integrity naturally flourish. The world sees the surface, you experience the depth. This reinterpretation of familiar concepts deepens with every conscious act of self-forgiveness. What was once weakness, the trembling, anxious self-consciousness, the relentless self-criticism, is now understood as strength. The fear that once paralyzed you transforms into a guide, showing precisely where liberation is needed. What seemed like emptiness, the quiet moments alone, the pauses for reflection, becomes fulfillment, a reservoir from which clarity and insight flow. And what once appeared as loss, the fading of old habits, the relinquishing of guilt, reveals itself as freedom, a freedom that had been hiding behind the illusion of punishment. Life for the first time in a long while feels expansive, and you feel capable of engaging with it not out of fear or obligation, but from a profound alignment with your own truth. In these moments, the consequences of your inner transformation begin to cascade outward. Decisions are made with calm certainty rather than anxious calculation, and relationships start to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. You no longer bend entirely to the expectations of others, yet your presence becomes more magnetic, not because you seek admiration, but because authenticity resonates deeply with those around you. The tension between appearance and essence intensifies the contrast. On the outside, some may misunderstand or judge, but inside, you experience the profound liberation that only comes from the courage to forgive yourself. And as this internal freedom grows, it begins to permeate every layer of your life, quietly reshaping the way you think, act, and feel, laying the groundwork for the final synthesis of strength and clarity that awaits. With each act of self-forgiveness, the landscape of your inner life begins to shift, subtly at first, then with unmistakable force. Where once there was fear of judgment, now there is quiet discernment. You begin to notice how much of your previous existence was spent performing, aligning yourself with invisible rules, trying to anticipate how others would see you. Every action was filtered through the lens of guilt or anxiety, leaving little space for authenticity or presence. But as you release self-condemnation, a new kind of awareness takes hold, one that is patient, steady, and remarkably gentle. This is not a sudden epiphany, but a continuous unfolding, a quiet revolution within, where the mind learns to witness rather than punish, and the heart begins to accept rather than resist. Externally, the world does not always understand this transformation. Some people may whisper that you have changed, that you are distant, or even cold. They may remember the old you, the one who sought their approval, who carried visible signs of anxiety and self-doubt, and assume that what they now see is a rejection of them. But they cannot see the internal reconciliation, the way your mind and heart have begun to converse with one another without judgment, the way your presence carries an unspoken authority rooted not in dominance, but in honesty. You are learning that appearances are often deceiving, that what looks like withdrawal is actually an expansion of consciousness, and that seeming silence is the emergence of clarity. In this quiet, invisible way, the man who forgives himself becomes more alive, more present, and more grounded than he ever was in the grip of self-recrimination. As this process unfolds, the consequences of your liberation ripple across every layer of life. Choices become aligned with reality rather than fear. Actions are guided by integrity rather than guilt. Relationships are approached with presence rather than neediness. The anxiety that once dictated behavior diminishes, leaving space for genuine curiosity and authentic engagement. Even setbacks, once triggers for self-loathing, are now met with observation and understanding. You begin to see patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior for what they are, not chains, but indicators, signposts along the path of awakening. And in recognizing this, the old story of failure begins to dissolve, replaced by a story of growth, resilience, and measured freedom. The internal transformation also deepens your perception of others. Where you once may have projected your guilt and fears, you now begin to recognize that everyone carries their own unseen battles. Empathy grows, but it is no longer weighted with obligation or self-punishment. You see the struggles of others without being consumed by them, and in that, you find a subtle, profound joy. Your existence is no longer framed by what you lack or by the debts of the past, but by the conscious choice to meet life fully, honestly, and with compassion for yourself and for the world. This is the quiet escalation of freedom, a layering of insight and presence that, while invisible to most, transforms your life from the inside out. As the practice of self-forgiveness embeds itself into your consciousness, you begin to recognize that your past does not define you, it informs you. The mistakes, the regrets, the choices you once thought irredeemable are now seen as threads in the tapestry of your life, each contributing to the shape of the person you are becoming. Where once there was shame, now there is understanding. Where once there was avoidance, now there is presence. Every interaction, every challenge, every quiet moment becomes a mirror reflecting your progress, a chance to measure not against others' expectations, but against the freedom you are cultivating within yourself. The man who forgives himself discovers that inner alignment is not achieved by erasing the past, but by embracing it, integrating it, and transforming it into insight. Externally, the changes are equally profound, though often subtle. People may notice a calmness in your voice, a steadiness in your gaze, or a patience in your demeanor that wasn't there before. Some may call it distance, others wisdom. But the reality is that your presence is no longer dictated by the need for validation. You are no longer trapped in the silent performance of pleasing or avoiding judgment. You are free to act from clarity and honesty. And paradoxically, it is in this authenticity that connection deepens. Those who resonate with your truth are drawn closer, while those who cannot see past old perceptions drift away, not as a loss, but as a natural alignment of energies. You are learning that liberation often looks like solitude from the outside, but it is, in fact, a deeper connection to life itself. This is also the stage where the reinterpretation of weakness and strength becomes undeniable. What you once thought of as failure, as limitation, now reveals itself as a foundation for resilience. The same emotional wounds that once weighed you down are now sources of empathy, courage, and depth. Loneliness, once feared, becomes a sacred space in which reflection and growth flourish. Even the pain that once seemed unbearable transforms into a quiet teacher, guiding you toward clarity and wisdom. In this light, the act of forgiving yourself is not simply a release, it is a reclamation of power. The battle you feared to fight, the one against your own judgment, is revealed to be the very arena where freedom is won. The escalation of consequences continues, unfolding layer by layer. Decisions made with fear give way to choices made with discernment. Relationships are no longer tests of worthiness, but opportunities for authentic engagement. The internal dialogue, once dominated by relentless criticism, now flows with honesty, gentleness, and understanding. You begin to notice a subtle rhythm in life, a harmony that was always possible but obscured by guilt. And in this rhythm, clarity and freedom are no longer distant ideals. They are tangible experiences woven into the very fabric of your day-to-day existence. Each moment of self-compassion reinforces the previous one, creating a feedback loop of inner strength that quietly, persistently reshapes who you are. At this stage, the transformation is unmistakable, though still mostly felt rather than spoken. The man who has learned to forgive himself walks through life with a quiet confidence that does not demand attention, a clarity that does not require explanation. Past errors, once sharp and jagged, have been softened by understanding, and the lessons they carry are now fully absorbed. There is no longer a compulsion to hide, to justify, or to prove worthiness. Instead, every action is infused with presence, every thought tempered by honesty, and every relationship approached with genuine engagement rather than compulsion or fear. The internal liberation manifests outwardly in subtle, almost invisible ways, and yet it radiates with undeniable strength. Externally, some may still misinterpret this new demeanor. Friends or colleagues may comment on a perceived distance, on a stoic calm, or even on a quiet arrogance. They do not see the struggle behind the serenity, the daily effort to confront and release old guilt, the courage it takes to be fully present with oneself. But in truth, this is the paradox of self-forgiveness. What looks like withdrawal or detachment to the outside world is actually the blossoming of inner clarity and freedom. The man is not removed from life. He is more deeply immersed in it. He sees the subtleties that others miss, the patterns that were once obscured by fear, and the depth of experience that emerges when one is no longer imprisoned by self-judgment. The reinterpretation of prior weakness into strength now becomes complete. What once seemed like a burden, the ceaseless replay of mistakes, the gnawing sense of inadequacy, is revealed as the crucible through which resilience is forged. Every moment of self-confrontation, every deliberate act of forgiveness has cultivated patience, empathy, and wisdom. Even the darkest regrets have been transformed into tools of insight, guiding decisions, shaping character, and deepening relationships. The man no longer fears his own heart. He knows it, he trusts it, and in doing so, he discovers that freedom is not the absence of error, but the embrace of it. At this point, the consequences of this inner work ripple through every facet of life. Choices are informed by discernment rather than compulsion. Connections with others become richer, more authentic, because they are no longer clouded by fear or neediness. The man experiences a sense of wholeness, not because life has become easier or devoid of challenge, but because he has reconciled with himself. And in this reconciliation, a profound power emerges. The power to act with clarity, the courage to face uncertainty, and the serenity to be present with what is, without fleeing into blame or self-punishment. Each layer of this transformation compounds the last, creating a structure of inner freedom that is invisible to most but palpable to those who themselves have glimpsed the depth of self-acceptance. And so we arrive at the paradox. What once seemed like isolation, the endless hours spent wrestling with your own guilt and regret, is in truth the foundation of clarity. What appeared as weakness, the trembling, the self-reproach, the fear of confronting your past, is in fact the source of your deepest strength. The act of forgiving yourself, which felt impossible at first, has become the gateway to liberation, a quiet power that informs every decision, every movement, every thought. The man who once feared his own reflection now meets it with honesty and compassion, and in doing so discovers that the true battle was never against others, nor against life itself, but against the resistance inside his own heart. Externally, the world may still misunderstand. Some may see distance or detachment, perhaps even arrogance. Yet these perceptions are superficial. They cannot touch the depth of transformation that has occurred. Inside, you are whole, at peace, and unshakably grounded. The chaos of judgment and fear has been replaced with a profound clarity, a steady presence, and an unspoken authority born of truth. You have learned that living in perpetual self-condemnation serves no one, and that the courage to face your own mistakes, to forgive them, and to move forward is the true mark of freedom. In this clarity, you are not lost, nor are you rejected. You are awakened, alive, and entirely yourself. This is a reflection worth sharing, because there are others still caught in the cycle of self-judgment, others still believing that the weight of their past defines their worth. I invite you to subscribe, to continue exploring these reflections with us, and to share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. And if you feel moved, leave a comment with your own experiences or thoughts on forgiveness, a small but significant act that connects us and gives life to the community. Every comment adds to the conversation, illuminating paths that others may not yet see, offering hope that self-forgiveness is not only possible but transformative. Remember, the hardest battle you will ever fight is not against the world. It is within yourself. And when you rise from that struggle, when you finally meet your own heart with compassion rather than condemnation, you discover a freedom that nothing outside of you could ever grant. Life is still worth living, your existence matters, and the power you have been seeking has always been within you, waiting for the courage to forgive yourself. The journey may be difficult, but it is precisely in that difficulty that your awakening takes root, quietly, steadily, and irrevocably, transforming every aspect of your being into a life of clarity, strength, and peace.